Now, the ISTJ is one of the very few introverted personality types that actually enjoy public speaking, especially if they've had time to practice and they understand the information. The ISTJ thinks of public speaking almost like a performance, and so they prepare themselves almost like they're an actor on a stage. The ISTJ is considered to be good at most things, and if they've had time to research and understand the information, they'll do well. Where the ISTJ does not necessarily do well is after the speech is finished, it's time for question and answer. And you may have someone who comes up to you as an ISTJ and you want kind of the small talk. The ISTJ enjoys giving the information but does not want to do all the small talk. So the small talk is something that the ISTJ will lose patience with. And because they're introverted, and especially those who are on the moderate to higher scale, they don't really want to do a whole lot of the social interaction. So doing the speech is fine. Afterwards, the question and answers is where the ISTJ may break down a little bit. And so the ISTJ has to realize when giving speeches that, especially if there's a question and answer period, that they've got to stay there, do the schmoozing, talk to your audience afterwards, and kind of equip yourself in your mind that that's going to happen, and be ready for the questions and answers. On the other hand, the ESTJ is often, again, a natural public speaker, but especially when they're older. So they can be a little nervous when they're young public speakers, but as they mature, as the ESTJ matures, they too like to entertain the audience, and they keep the speech interesting by being entertaining. It's important that you don't try to memorize your speech word for word, and this goes for every single speaker. My strong advice is don't try to do the memorization of the speeches. It's not something that is really going to help. And as we get to the end of this course, I'm going to talk to you about why it's important that you learn to speak extemporaneously. And what this means is conversationally. So the ESTJ rarely gets nervous, and they do a very good job and are very impressive when it comes to public speaking. So again, the ISTJ and the ESTJ, they consider themselves somewhat performers, and they enjoy being on the stage, and they think of public speaking as being on stage. So let's talk a little bit now that we have completed all of the personality types, and we've talked about how those personality types are as public speakers, and what are some of the things that the personality types can do to become more effective or better public speakers. Have you heard of an ambivert? What is an ambivert? Well, we know that introverts are folks that are more internally focused. Introverts tend to be types that people think of as shy. And I know, being an introvert myself, I'm not shy. But an introvert is somebody that gets their energy from being alone, from being or thinking or developing skills inside of themselves and then putting it out to the world. The extrovert, on the other hand, enjoys the interaction. They enjoy being in social situations, and they get their energy from being in social situations. The ambivert is the balance of the two. The ambivert is a person who has a balanced introvert, extrovert personality type. What this means is that they could go either way. They enjoy social settings, although I would say ambiverts do not enjoy huge crowds for long periods of time, but they can certainly enjoy being in a crowd or being in a situation where there are lots of people there, and so they feel comfortable speaking in a crowd. They feel comfortable speaking in a small group. They're balanced. The ambivert tends to or could seem like an introvert at times and seem like an extrovert at other times. This person enjoys public speaking and may sometimes have to be asked to speak, but when they do speak, they can speak well. Now, to end this course, the one thing that I always leave you with in terms of public speaking is that no matter what, no matter your personality type, no matter what the circumstance is, if you're going to be doing a speech, there are things that you must do. And so first and foremost, as I've said throughout this presentation, no matter what type of personality type you are, you must know your material. If you want to appear credible, and if you want to appear confident, you must know what you're talking about. If you don't, you'll find that your audience will disengage quickly, or during the question and answer period, they will definitely ask you, or they will poke holes in your speech, and that will lead to a deflated feeling and a lack of confidence for the next time you have to speak. So do your research, guys. Don't go, especially the perceiving types, don't go unprepared to a speech. Understand how to engage your audience, and what this means is that you must take a look at your audience and see how your audience is responding to you. If your audience is getting bored, if you find that they're looking away, looking at their phones, talking to each other, you have got to pivot. And what that means is, if you're speaking in a low tone, raise your tone. If it means that you are an extrovert and you're comfortable engaging your audience, ask the audience a question, especially if it's not a large crowd. Ask them a question. Wait on them to answer it. This way, you're putting the onus on your audience to respond and re-engage with you. Engage your audience. Always take a look at the audience, take a look at their non-verbal body language to see if they're engaged. You'll know if they're engaged. They're leaning forward, they're giving you eye contact, they're nodding their heads. If they're disengaged, you'll know, re-engage your audience. And then, before you give your speech, practice, practice, practice. Practice the speech. Do not read it verbatim unless it is mandated that you do so. Otherwise, practice the speech. Practice it in front of a mirror. Practice it by recording it. Practice it to a small live audience of your peers who can give you some good feedback. But practice, practice, practice. And then know your audience. Before you give your speech, ask whomever it is who's asked you to speak who your audience is comprised of. What is the demographics of your audience? Meaning the makeup of your audience. Do you have folks who are your age, older, younger, in between? Do you have different ethnicities, races, cultural differences, sexual orientation differences than yourself, or your own orientation? Make sure that you know who you're speaking to. Never do a generic speech. Never do a one-size-fits-all one-size-fits-all speech. Do a speech that is tailored to your specific audience. Do use presentation aids. By this I mean slides, PowerPoint slides, Google slides. And if you don't use slides, you don't have to use slides. Use pictures, use charts, use graphs. And you can even use interactives like quizzes and the like. But use presentation and props. If you're talking about a cell phone, bring a cell phone in. If you're talking about something that is tangible, bring it to the audience, pass it around, but don't pass it around at a time when you're speaking and you really need to be engaged with your audience. Let your audience know that you'll be passing it around after you've finished with your speech during the question and answer period, or pass it around before. Remember, if you have a prop and you pass it around during your speech, your audience may become disengaged. But definitely use presentation aids. And don't apologize, guys. And what I mean by this is, obviously, if you screwed up, if you've messed up, you do want to make sure that you have clarified or you've let your audience know that you need to restate something. But you don't necessarily have to apologize. Every time you apologize, you take the energy, the positive energy away from yourself. So let your audience know, I need to go back to my previous point. I need to restate some things. I need to clarify some things. Or you might say to your audience, especially if you're an extrovert, is there anything that I've said that's confusing, or have I confused you in any way? Is there a point that I need to clarify for you before I move forward? So come from a position of strength, and when you do, your audience will appreciate it, and so will you. You will feel positive still, and you will be in a positive state of mind. And that helps by not saying, oh my God, I screwed up. I'm sorry. I apologize. There are other ways to handle that. And finally, relax, guys. Relax. If you know your material, if you've engaged your audience, if you've practiced, if you know who your audience is and you're speaking specifically to that audience, and you found presentation aids that match your audience and that they will respond to, and you're using your positive energy, you can relax because you can be yourself. And please, 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 please don't try to be anybody else but yourself. Now remember to use conversational language. Speak to the level of your audience. If you're speaking to high school students, don't speak to them as if you're speaking to somebody who's in your business circle or some other audience. Speak to the audience in the language that they will understand. Use conversational language. Use an outline as your guide. And in my course in becoming an effective public speaker, I've given you 2 free outlines to use as your guide. Use an outline as your guide. And be knowledgeable. Be knowledgeable helps you to appear credible. When you appear credible, you appear confident and you feel confident. So be knowledgeable. Now, if you do this, you've got this. You too can overcome your fear of public speaking. Take good care, guys.